Someone keeps muting it on the wall. Muting it on the wall. Sorry, it happened last week. He emailed me last week.
We'll call to order the Committee of the Whole, and the first thing we'll do is roll call. The board isn't working today, so we'll do it the old-fashioned way.
Supervisor Lynn?
Present.
Supervisor Anderson? Chair Long?
Here.
Kathy Deep?
Present.
Supervisor Cook?
Present.
Supervisor Adams?
Present.
Supervisor Burning? Supervisor Attino?
Present.
Supervisor Fiedler?
Present.
Supervisor Osnes? Supervisor Humphrey?
Present.
Supervisor Hanson?
Good morning.
Supervisor Shirley?
Present.
Supervisor Telejohn?
Present.
Supervisor Carlson? Supervisor Barkalow?
Present.
Supervisor Swampville?
Present.
Supervisor Van Summeren?
Present.
Supervisor
Thank you. We have a quorum. Can I have a motion to approve our minutes of our last Committee of the Whole?
Move to
Supervisor
approve.
Cook. Second. Supervisor Remberg. Any discussion? Hearing no discussion, the minutes are approved. Next item on the agenda is public comment. Is there any public comment today? Any public comment? Roy Schoberg, please come to the podium. And we're going to be limiting our public comment strictly to 3 minutes as we usually do. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. I'm glad you all came to meet me this morning. So, no, I'm here representing CASA, and I just wanted to let you all know that things are going very well at CASA. We have 11 applicants about to go through their training, so we're building up our program fast, and we should be able to serve as many as 1/3 of all the children in need as early as sometime next year, and we're going to keep adding people. Why I'm here is I'm here if you have any questions about the CASA program. I'm here also to request that somewhere in your budget, and I've submitted some documents already. I've met with Heather regarding a legal issue. If you have any questions on our request for funding, I'm here to address those. I do ask that for the next 3 years, you partner with us so that you give us that little gentle nudge that we need right now to keep going. Until we're in existence for 2 to 3 years, the foundations don't really want to donate money to startup organizations. And so that's what the little bit of flack we're running into, so we need the county's financial support. So I'm here to address any questions throughout the program here. I'll be here all the time. Any questions right now? No. Okay, I'm standing by.
Thank you, Mr. Schoberg. Any other public comment? Seeing no other public comment, we'll move to our business items, which is review of the 2023 budget. The first person I'm going to turn to is our chair, Bob Long.
Thank you, Supervisor Fiedler. Just a couple of real quick comments so we can get this moving along. First of all, believe it or not, we actually have made a number of improvements in this budget process over the last couple of years. So we've been trying to bring the board into this process a little earlier in the year and improve transparency. So, but clearly, because we're here, it's far from perfect. So if you do have any other ideas, suggestions, and things that we can do to improve the process, we're all ears, and if we can work together to try to make it a smoother process, that would be fabulous. Secondly, we're going to get into a lot more detail today than we typically have in the last couple of years. But I think it's a good thing, because I think it really is a reflection of your dedication and your desire to make sure, and your concern about making sure that we're being good stewards of our tax dollars. So I thank you for that, and I applaud you for that. Lastly, I just want to thank those of you who actually had questions and issues that actually got together and addressed them with County Administrator Witt. That was really important for you to do that, because I was reluctant in holding this meeting. I wanted to make sure that there was substance and there was enough significant issues. And there were several of you that actually addressed a number of issues with Administrator Witt directly that helped me decide that, yeah, we really need to do this and work through some of this detail. So for those of you who did that, I thank you very much. And at this point, I'll then turn it over to Administrator Witt.
Thank you, Chair Long. If you see me smiling a lot today, it's because there's nothing I love better than talking about the budget. So thank you guys for asking me to come back and spend a few more hours talking about the budget. So that's what the big grin on my face is for, is because this is good stuff. I love this. I brought a lot of support with me today. You can see I have a whole room full here. The budget's a big document, and I know a lot about the budget, but they know the details that I can't remember, because I can't remember everything. But we'll get through everything that you have. I did want to talk, before we start going over it section by section, just a little bit about the concept of how we budget here. You know, I talk about this at different times, and then we get new supervisors, and I don't remember if I've told you or not yet. So I'm going to tell you again, so even if you've heard it before, we're going to go over it. So in St. Croix County, and really in all counties in Wisconsin, the budget's broken into 3 segments. So if you look at how we're generating that tax revenue, it's 3 different segments. So we have an operating levy, we have a special purpose levy, and we have a debt service levy. Now, each of those 3 sections of the levy have different rules. So the operating levy, which covers most of the budget, 98% of the budget, is subject to levy limitations by the state. It can only go up as a percentage basis of the net new construction. So if it's 35 million this year and you can go up 1%, that's 350,000. That's how it grows. It's just a percentage next year of the net new construction number. The special purpose levy, I don't worry about that. That's really just the library levy. It's calculated, we apply it, and that's what's in there. Robbie has a highway bridge part in there too for $62,000, inconsequential really in the big picture of things. So the debt service levy then, that's the other really important one. So the debt service levy is not subject to levy limits, but that's really where we have the most flexibility though to adjust the tax rate for the taxpayers. So what I'm going to tell you is, as we go through the budget today and you cut $100,000 out of operating, I don't want to reduce the operating part of the levy, because that will hurt us in future years because it's a percentage growth in the future years. What I would like to do then is to reallocate that to somewhere else in the budget, save the money, and apply that against the debt service levy. So we can still have the same savings for you, but it won't hurt us in future years as far as a percentage of growth. So we just have to understand the concept between the 3 types of levies. And then the other thing I wanted to talk to you about was how I budget when I look at all of the department requests. So after all the departments submitted their requests, I cut about $1 million out of the budget to get us to a balanced budget. When I go through the budget and I look, I'm looking at multi-years of history and other knowledge that I have about what's happening within that department, where they're headed, what the department heads are telling me about what their goals are and what their future expenses may be, because they may not match the history. So all of those factors are being taken into consideration in the recommendation that I have. And I know that you're going to have some questions on some of these line items, and we'll share with you what some of that information is so that you'll have the same background then that I made my decisions on. But when I look at an expense, if you look at any individual line item expense, just because it might not be hitting what it is this year or what it was last year, doesn't mean that I'll necessarily drop that expense right away. Because I'm looking for a trend, a multi-year trend on the expenses. What I don't want to do is I don't want to start reducing a department's expenses and it was just a down year, and then they go over budget the next year. That creates more problems for us. And there's a benefit for us to be under budget. So if they have another down year, it's not the worst thing in the world. What happens to that extra money is the departments don't get to keep it. It comes back to the unassigned fund balance. And that unassigned fund balance, we just last month, we reallocated $3.8 million out to other parts of the budget. One of those parts was to the debt service fund, which I can then use to reduce tax levy for the taxpayers. We put some money into the capital improvement plan, which is an area I really like to fund, because that avoids future borrowing costs. It allows us to fund the capital projects that we have to maintain the facilities that we have, but I don't have to go out and borrow for it. A lot of counties are borrowing every single year. St. Croix County isn't borrowing. It's because we've developed this system that we're using the excess cash savings that we have to avoid those smaller debt issues. So it's a system, but we are reinvesting the money that we get back from the departments to avoid future expenses for the taxpayers, avoid future taxes for the taxpayers. So we're not overtaxing them. We're repurposing those funds for another use. So that's an important concept to keep in mind. So if you see that, you know, they spent $80,000 last year, but the budget's $100,000, I wouldn't drop that right away. I would wait to see that that's an ongoing trend before I drop it. So anyways, that's just the methodology that I have when I go through the budget and why we do it that way. So the format for today then, what we've talked about doing is we'll call out a tab number. If there's any questions within that tab, we'll ask what the question is, and then we'll go page by page through the tab if there are questions within the tab. So if we can skip a whole tab, that'd be great. We have 29 tabs here to go through. You'll ask a question on a specific line item on the page that we're focusing on at that time. We'll give an explanation for it. That'll either be satisfactory for you or you're going to have a recommendation that we change it. So if you want to change a line item, we'll do so while we're on that line item. I don't want to come back because we'll be flipping all day. So just ask for it at that point in time, and then we'll just ask for a quick show of preference from the Board of Supervisors that's here of whether they're interested in changing that line item. If I get a majority in support of changing the line item, I will adjust that in the budget before the November 1st County Board meeting. So what I'll do is, if you look at any page of the budget with the line item detail, there's a blank column right now, which is the 2023 adopted budget. I'm going to pre-populate that with any changes that we have today for the November 1st, so that you'll be able to see recommended to County Board approved. You will still have the ability to change that on November 1st if you wanted to, but that's how I'm going to show the changes for November 1st. It'll only be digital format. I won't have budget books reprinted for you. I'll probably have to spend all weekend just getting the updates if we end up with all of Supervisor Shirley's requests. So I know he has a big list. So anyways, that's the format for today. So any questions before we start in? Everyone understand the path? That's Supervisor Shirley.
When looking through this budget, I think that, first of all, it's really important to have this meeting today. And I thank the chair for having that. One of our most important jobs as supervisors is to take care of this budget and the taxpayers' money. So when we talked a lot about in the past about the mill rate, but what we're really asking the taxpayers this time is to support a $6.5 million in new spending. And a lot of that we can't control. A lot of that's in labor and in those line items there of stuff that really is, we don't have a lot of control on. But where we can control, I think we need to be very mindful of that this time around when we're really going through these line items today. So luckily for us, you know, we've said before, St. Croix County is growing. You know, we're asking them to cover the $6.5 million of new spending, but new construction is covering $1 million of that. So really, we're spending $7.5 million more than where we were last year. So I think we need to be really mindful of that. And while we're looking at little line items where we may talk about reducing it $500 here, $1,000 there, those little cuts add up. And I think that they'll make a big difference to people. As you see, our economy is decreasing. They're seeing their expenses at home increase. We need to minimize what the taxes that they see from us as much as possible. Thanks.
All right. Oh,
It always seems to me that the budget's never, ever, ever, ever going to go down or stay the same. And as we go through it, all the extra money that's left over, and we had this discussion at our last meeting, goes into the KIP fund. Well, never have I seen that the KIP fund doesn't get spent. It's saved. And so to me, I think it's a cycle that, yes, it's good in some ways, but maybe we need to take some of that money back because it's just an ongoing spend, spend, spend. Thank you.
we did put $800,000 into the debt service fund out of that $3.8 million, and that is where you can directly impact what the taxpayers see for the tax increase. That money can be used to lower the tax levy, and that's the vehicle that I put forward for you. So whenever you want to do that, you just have to tell me, I want the money to go to the debt service fund. Putting in the debt service fund will reduce the tax levy. So that's the vehicle. It's right there in front of you guys. So, all right. So in the budget then, a couple of the first sections are really summaries. So any questions on tabs 1, 2, 3, or 4? Yes, go ahead.
So
What page are you
on, we're good, right? Okay, thank you. So when I was calculating this, and tell me if I'm wrong, but in the end, with the net new construction on the actual operating levy side of things, I think it is only, it looks like a $3,000 overall increase in that operational levy, even with the, if you don't take into account the additional net new construction. So overall, the tax levy, the overall levy is looking really healthy on the operating side, where Supervisor Shirley said it's some million dollars in overall increased spending from year over year. A lot of that is on the debt service side. So I just wanted to make sure that, one, I'm speaking the truth, because that's what I found in my numbers. Is that correct? Or am I close?
Yeah. So we would actually take, so up on the screen here, and it's on, let me get to the page in your books, so I give you the right page. So it's page 12 of the budget book. So what we have here is the operating levy. Let me blow it up a little bit so you guys can see it better. All right. So the operating levy is up $936,000. So it was $30 million last year, $31.8 million this year, 3.04. So that is net new construction plus the 2 closed TIF districts for 0.24. So that is all new taxpayers paying that. That's all new taxpayers. So the 6.2 million roughly of total tax levy increase, you'd actually deduct that, not add that. So the increase for the taxpayers is actually the $5,190,000, which is the debt service, and then $44,429. That's the library levy, that's calculation based upon the number of circulations. That goes up and down every year. So that's only assessed against municipalities that do not have their own library. So kind of ignore that just a little bit because we don't have a lot of control over that. So the $5 million, that is the new increase, and that is entirely the $80 million government center expansion. That's the new payment next year for the government center expansion. And absolutely, that's additional money that the taxpayers, from all the current taxpayers and the new taxpayers, that we're asking for. All right. So any other questions on anywhere in the first 4 tabs? Supervisor Van Summeren.
Just something I found interesting, and I've already talked with the Administrator Witt on this, and that's on page 9. With so much money floating around in our government today, there's a section of it under about the 3rd section down, donations and contributions from private organizations, which kind of, I wondered what that was, and Ken answered the question well for me. Ken, would you answer that for the whole group, please?
Yeah, let me find that on the page again here. It's on page 9, you said?
It's on page 8 in our book.
Okay, very good.
Which is, different here.
Okay, here it is. It's on page 10 in the book. So $260,000, it's donations and contributions from private organizations. So you can make a charitable contribution to St. Croix County, care of donations, 1101 Carmichael Road, Hudson, Wisconsin, 54016, if you'd like to. So we do receive donations. We receive about $250,000 a year in donations. Now, $200,000 of that is going into the ADRC. So they get, by far, the vast majority of the donations, which includes the meal sites. So because it's not a charge for the meal sites, it's a donation at the meal sites, that's where that money is recorded. They do get other donations. We have a canine fund that receives donations. The nursing home has donations. And contributions from private organizations also includes the vending machines. So if you get hungry and you want to buy a snack, the profit from that goes into this line item also. So we make hundreds of dollars a year off of that. Yeah. All right. So if there's no other questions on the first 4 tabs, we'll get into the line item detail. So tab number 5, which is Circuit Court. Any questions under tab 5, page 53 or 54? Yeah, Supervisor Hanson.
I'm wondering if we did honor Mr. Schoberg's request to fund CASA. Is this where we would discuss it?
You know, I've thought about where I would expense that. I'm still going to professionally recommend that we don't do that, but the county board can do whatever they want. If they want to fund CASA, this is probably the budget that I would put it into. So that would be an additional expense somewhere in this area that I would create, yes.
So I'm thinking that it wouldn't be a bad idea, and I would ask if we did, if anybody else has thought about it, maybe this would be a time to put your green paddles to use, because it's a good program. The judges are in favor of it, and this is the season to keep the judges happy, in my opinion. It's a great program, and we've heard about it several times. And not that I disrespect your opinion, I do deeply, but I feel very strongly that this is a wonderful program, and it's helping children who are deeply at risk, and any time we can do that, we save money on the back end in human services.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the exact account number, I'd have to get from our finance director which one she would want, but it would go within this cost center. So are you making a request?
I'm making a request.
Okay. All right, so we have a, go ahead, Chair Fiedler.
Maybe I could just, we're in discussion phase, so if I could just ask, could we get the opinion, you gave your opinion as to your professional opinion about whether this was proper or not. Could we get the opinion from the corporate counsel on this?
So there is a statute that explains what CASA is. and it indicates they're either volunteers or employees. And so there is a possibility that we could enter into a service agreement with the nonprofit organization, meaning St. Croix County could enter into a service agreement to provide, for them to provide those services to the county. I did provide some information to Supervisor Leaf, I believe, and other supervisors regarding the funding mechanism that the state currently has. So currently the state appropriates $250,000 a year to the Department of Justice, and the Department of Justice uses those funds to help fund the CASA programs throughout the state of Wisconsin. There are currently 10 CASA programs serving 13 counties. So that's where some of that funding comes from, and then the other funding is from donations. So I believe the intent was to have CASAs primarily be standalone and from the money from the Department of Justice and then donations from private organizations. However, there are some counties that do receive funding or that do fund the nonprofits through usually the clerk of court's offices is where that funding comes from through service agreements, indicating that the nonprofit is providing those services to the county. So it is legal to do through a service agreement, and there are a couple counties that do it. That's the research that I found so far. And when I say clerk of courts, we come out somewhere in the court's budget. The exact department I'd ask, I defer to Ken. But the couple agreements that I reviewed from Dane County, Outagamie County, it's within their court system that those agreements are entered into and budgeted under.
Could you clarify why we need a service agreement and why it couldn't be just a budgeted item? I'm sure there's a legal precedent there.
Because we cannot donate to a nonprofit entity, the service agreement would provide that legal mechanism to provide the funding to that entity. And it would set forth the responsibilities that CASA would provide to the county, so they have to do, certain things. And basically, it's instead of just a donation, we're just giving them $50,000 as a donation. That's not allowed by the Attorney General's opinion. We'd have to enter into a service agreement that they're providing certain services to the county.
If I could just add one additional discussion item or discussion point. I think we all support CASA. I don't think anybody in the room is going to oppose CASA. The only question was, is it legal to do what we're going to do? And we're hearing that maybe through the service agreement it is. But we'd also heard when this was initiated a couple of years ago that it would receive private funding in the relatively near term. Now, Mr. Schoberg has mentioned that foundations don't seem to be inclined to donate to newly started nonprofits, and that's generally, I think, a true statement. But I would ask if, as Supervisor Hansen's suggestion is considered, we consider it in the vein that we might want to support it, but we as a board would strongly support CASA and Mr. Schoberg's efforts to get funding from foundations so that a year from now, hopefully there would have been rousing success and we would not have to spend county dollars to do this again. So I would just urge, as we consider Supervisor Hansen's motion, I think he's signaling that he approves that we approve it, but that we also do everything we can to work with Mr. Schoberg to show our support to foundations so that a year from now we're not asking for county dollars, but we're very happy to have received many dollars from foundations. 1 year. So
my intent is this is to launch. It's a 1 year. It's good to have you kind of a launching gift. Or agreement. This is right.
Did you have an amount, Dan, in mind?
This is where I'd ask Roy, if you would ask for what amount?
Thank you all for indulging me. So the dollar amount, you're already giving us a free office. We appreciate that very much. The windows are a little subject, but so it's $50,000 for next year, of which $9,000 we consider to be your gift in kind from the office. So it's $41,000. And $41,000, if that could come to us in installments of quarterly, it's about $10,250 per quarter. And the service agreement that I drafted, that I shared with Heather, shows that at any time, this, if we don't provide the services that you're expecting from us, it's cancelable. So you pay a quarter, and then you're disappointed with our response or whatever. All of a sudden, there's some reason that the county doesn't want to continue to entertain being our partner, you can cancel it. So it'd be $10,250 per quarter, $41,000. Dane County is actually splitting how they support the CASA. Half of it comes from their court system, and half of it comes from HHS. So when I approached Heather and knew that this was going to leak up to Ken, I said, well, why not $5,125 per quarter from HHS and $5,125 per quarter from the PP&J department. So that's what I was thinking the Justice Department would do half of it. So $41,000. I was looking for a 3-year commitment. Of course, I'm happy with a 1-year offer of compromise too. So, any other questions? I do have something that this is what I sent to you, Ken. So this is, for those who didn't receive this, this is the funding proposal, as I just said, so you can see something in writing to look at. If you run out, if there's not enough, I'll come around and give one to you. Thank you so much for putting this on your agenda. Thank you, Dan.
If there's no other comment, I think I'll turn it back. Oh, I'm sorry.
Roy, I hate to get you did some exercise today, but could you come back up for a second? So I see we've got like very general numbers in here. Is there a detailed budget that you could provide for us before we commit to this? And then also, I just don't personally feel comfortable coming into a committee of the whole like this and just all of a sudden there's a $41,000 line item drop. So I mean, I'd like to see something a little bit more with more meat on it before just dropping 41 grand onto it.
Got it. I got it right here.
Perfect.
Question for Corp Counsel. You know, I'm not saying anything against CASA, but if we go into this agreement, does that set us in a precedent with other nonprofits to go in the same action?
Possibly, if another county requests our copy of our service agreement and what we do here, we would provide it to them. It's not a secret document, so we would provide that. And when I reached out to like Dane County, Outagamie County, they sent me theirs of what they've entered into and how much money they've provided. For instance, Barron County provided $50,000 as a startup. Our county provided $50,000 as a startup to CASA. And so a lot of the counties that I researched, there was a startup amount provided, but not ongoing.
My question was more towards other nonprofits.
So there has to be statutory authority to give money to a nonprofit. So either in Chapter 59 or some other section of the statutes, there has to be some authority to do so. In this case, CASA is referenced in Chapter 48, and there's a specific statute that indicates it's either volunteer or employee. That's the CASA advocate is either an employee or a volunteer. So in this case, we can enter into the service agreement with the nonprofit to provide that funding. But the Attorney General opinion indicates we can't just provide donations to a food pantry. There's nowhere in the statute that would allow for us to do that. And so there has to be some statutory authority in order for us to do it.
And if I could respond to that comment too, CASA exists to support the judges. Our customers are the little children who are under court supervision. I wouldn't be here today unless Judge Waterman tapped me on the shoulder and said, hey, Roy, we need some help. So we deliver quality feedback to the judges. And you could ask here our probate department head. She knows the program's going well. It's very valued by the judges. We're providing the county with a service of volunteers is what we're doing. We're training the volunteers. That's all our budget is train volunteers so they can help the court system and take care of these kids. That's why I'm here this morning.
I'd like to make a quick suggestion to move this thing along a little bit. We have a lot to cover. Could we separate this into two issues? First of all, maybe vote on, do we feel like we want to enter into the service agreement with CASA as one vote, and then later on, depending upon how much savings we might have generated through our other discussions, we can decide on the appropriate amount or the amount that we're comfortable with. Would that be doable?
All right. So I think the first question is, and exactly the point, because I don't have 41,000 yet. You know, we hit that first on the agenda rather than later on after you guys have, you know, provided some savings. So, yeah, so the first question is, do you want to enter into a service agreement with CASA? Okay, thank you. We have one vacancy. Okay, so that motion did pass. Not pass, it's not technically a vote, but there is a majority of supervisors in favor of entering into that agreement. Okay, so we will move on from the budget. We will come back to this question later on this morning, or, you know, afternoon or evening, whenever we get done with the rest of the questions. So there's another joke. Yeah. All right.
And what was the total count?
It was 13-5. Yep. Okay. So any other questions then on page 53 or 54 under tab 5? We're on page 53 and 54, which is the section of tab 5, Circuit Court.
Yes.
Yep, go ahead, shoot.
So looking at staff development, we see that there has been a lack of use of those funds pretty much overall throughout the departments.
Yep.
And that's line item 51910. That's a significant amount of money that we could be utilizing.
Yeah. During the COVID pandemic, a lot of in-person trainings were canceled. And so you're going to see those numbers have dipped over those last 2 years. So yeah, there was a lot of training that did not happen over the last couple of years. I do expect those numbers to come back up, and that's where I talk about, I'm expecting that trend to reverse itself as more in-person trainings come back up. If that trend continues though, because a lot of online learning has been developed over the last 2 years, if those trends continue post-pandemic here, then by all means, we will reduce those in future years. I didn't reduce any this year though, because of the decline from the pandemic, though.
Just to follow up on that, so what did we do in lieu of? Did we do virtual? Did we?
Yeah, there was a lot of online training that was done. A lot of training options were moved to online options, which eliminated travel expenses, hotel expenses. Registration fees were generally lower for online training options than in-person training options. So the county saved a lot of money on those line items. But I don't know if it's going to continue exactly that way, or if we're going to go back to in-person for all of these things. I guess, are you guys going back to in-person stuff, or are you guys staying online? Back to in-person stuff? Trainings back to in-person? I see a lot of nodding heads back here. It's like a little bobble. So I think those numbers will come back up. Yeah.
One other area is other professional services. I also see that is a significant downward trend. Postage, same thing, not utilized nearly as much. Copy expense, same thing. I mean, we're talking several $1,000s on these line items.
Yep. Other professional services, you guys want to address that one? Okay. Do you want to explain why it's been lower the last couple of years? Law clerk budget, she said.
Yes, so the other professional services in the circuit court budget is $12,000 for a law clerk for Commissioner Heckman. And some years he's able to find an appropriate student at the appropriate time that can come in and serve the judges over the summer. And some years he's not able to find the appropriate candidate. And during COVID, I don't think the last 2 years he had an intern, but we did have one this past summer.
And then your postage has been down also. I mean, last year was just under 7,000. Through September, you were just under 5.
We're kind of in a state of flux because we're seeing more cases electronically filed, so the paper notices that we send for court hearings are going more electronic. I think the monthly amount that we use has stayed consistent. There was an increase the year before because there were so many hearings that were rescheduled or changed because of COVID. So in 2020 also. So you could take some money from my postage.
Just a follow-up, though, on the other professional services. Tim Heckman has someone right now. We've got 12,000 budgeted. We're at 4665. How close to the 12,000 are we going to get on that?
His intern completed his service at the end of summer. So nothing more will be used from that budget.
This is through September 27th.
Yeah, so I mean, do you think it would be prudent for us to move, like, take 3,000, 4,000, 2,000 out of that and move that as well?
Absolutely.
And then staff development, does that doesn't encompass mileage, lodging, and meal expenses, because I see that's a separate line item. So
The previous register and probate had lumped together all of the line items for conferences in one account code. So I tried spreading it out this year so I could get a more accurate idea and better reporting for the clerk's report to the state. I'm just not exactly sure how it's going to look yet, because some of the conferences haven't been scheduled. I know some for the first quarter next year, but I don't know how far the commissioners are going to have to travel. I know that Judge Nordstrand would like to go to the National Drug Court Association meeting, and he needs about $2,500 for that.
Wow.
So I think traditionally, those accounts have been used for other line items in the budget, but it doesn't really show that yet. And unfortunately, that historical information has been lost as the previous register retired.
Oh, boy. Okay. All right, so that makes sense on staff development in that area. And then copy expense, talk to me about that.
Let me grab my notes.
Sorry. Thank you.
3,000.
Yeah. So the Judicial Assistance Office and the Register and Probate Office, we are under a contract for our copiers. So that's what that money is. And the managed print cost is the court commissioner's copier.
So he's pointed out that we've been running about 1,000 the last few years, and we have 3,000 budgeted on copy expense.
I don't think our copy expense would change much, so if you want to take 1,000 from there, that would also be doable.
I was thinking more, but we could settle on 1,000. I could be pragmatic at times. Okay, I'm good on that one, thank you.
So do you have a list of changes that you'd like to see on those?
I think so.
All right. Why don't you list those changes for me, please, Supervisor Burning?
All right, what did we say? Help me on the deal again. We got 1,000. Oh, thank you very much. 1,000 less on 53-130.
All right.
120.
No, no,
Which is
53
managed print costs.
120 copy expense.
120, sorry, thank you.
Minus 1,000?
Yep. We talked about postage, and I think what did we say, 2,000? Did we say something? I don't know, someone will call me out on video on that. I don't remember what we said.
I think it was 1,000.
2 grand? Yeah, God bless you for that. Other professional services, I think we said we could bring that down. 3 to 4 is what I had said, but I mean, I'm not the only supervisor here, so help. 4, oh, Ryan says, right, sold.
Sold. Down to 7?
Down to
6.
6.
6.
And I'm a foodie, so I'm not going to touch the meal expense part for you guys. While you're out doing the people's bidding, enjoy some food. So, all right, thank you very much.
It's a per diem. Yeah. Okay, so I have $7,000 in cuts. Do you understand the line items that's being cut? It's 52190 from 10,000 to 6,000. Line 53110 postage, 8,600 to 6,600, and copy expense, the one right below that, from 3,000 to 2,000.
I'd like to clarify on the intern, does that leave enough money for the intern?
I believe so.
It covered what they spent this year, yes.
Paul, would you be willing to give him another $1,000? I mean, if the intern can stay another couple of weeks, it's not a bad idea, just give him another another 1,000, give him some breathing room.
He wants to add 1,000 back on the other professional services. So instead of cutting it from 10,000 to 6,000, to cut it to 7,000.
Looking at, from what I think you said, we don't have any more expenses coming out this year, so we've only spent $4,600 this year, and there's no more expenses coming out. So moving that to 6, we still have a cushion there, I think.
It doesn't carry over, though, we're talking about next year.
Right, but if they only spent $4,600 this year, and we're allocating $6,000 next year, we're giving them more than what they spent this year.
All right, I like to let the managers do their managing. I don't mind cutting it based on the history, but hiring an intern, and remember, the wage inflation is also growing, and they've had a problem finding interns. I wonder why maybe other places pay more for interns. I don't know. Cutting the budget when they've had a hard time finding somebody, I don't know. That's fine. If you want to go 6, we'll go 6.
So I have $7,000 of changes on page 53. If you all understand that, I will now take your input. I don't know. It's inputs, so. Yeah. All right. So I'm moving that one as recommended. All right. So we'll move on to tab number 6 then, which covers the clerk of courts. You'll see the line item detail on pages 58 and 59. Are there any questions on the clerk of courts budget? Go ahead, Supervisor Shirley.
Other professional services, I see that we're over our adopted budget this year, and we're increasing it a little bit, but I want to make sure that we're, if we're cutting things, we're also looking at, our expenses are going up in one area. We got to be mindful of that too. And my second question would be bank service charges. What in these line items throughout all of these different budgets, some of them have bank service charges, some of them don't. Could you explain that a little bit?
Yeah, most departments don't have their own banking accounts. You're going to see that mostly in the Treasurer's Department. HHS, Clerk of Courts, has a lot of money that they maintain on their own because of statutory requirements, but most departments don't have their own banking at all. Operating or other professional services, Christie?
Good morning. Other professional services, as far as clerk of court, is for psych evals and mediation. So it's court-ordered services that we have to provide. And your other question was
On the bank service charges.
Bank service
I think that was
charges.
more general, though, why you see it some
Yeah.
places and not others.
Yeah.
Okay.
So on jury fees per diem, we've got quite a load in the DA's office. Are you seeing that that's going to be adequate? Because, I mean, there's a lot going on in St. Croix County right now.
We're looking at 65,000.
There is. I'm hopeful that it's enough. We do have I think, a 2 to 3 week jury trial coming up in January and February, which will also impact interpreter costs because we need a team of Kurdish interpreters for that. Whether or not that goes, I'm not sure. That's why I have that. I know we have big cases coming, but I don't know when I have no idea when they'll come to fruition. We were supposed to have 2 high-profile jury trials this month, and one settled and one is being rescheduled, so likely into 2023. So hopefully.
Supervisor Adams?
If you could articulate on those interpretive services, what's the increase on that? That's pretty high.
It is pretty high, and that's because I just calculated for the last 3 months, we had 40 appearances by interpreters, 7 different languages. And a lot of the rare languages have to be remote, so their prices are somewhat reduced. But we're just seeing a major increase in the number of requests for interpreters, and they have to be provided for parties, victims, witnesses. And so it's because the need is growing significantly for whatever reason, I don't know. We had 2 cases yesterday for individuals that we didn't know until 15 minutes before the hearing was supposed to start that they needed an interpreter. So the demand is very heavy right now. So the state does give us some reimbursement for interpreter costs, but it doesn't totally cover what we get billed. Thank you. You're welcome.
Any requested changes on pages 58 or 59?
I'm just curious how your postage is going down.
Well, okay. It's not going to be down because in September and October is when we do our major mailings for our qualification questionnaires for next year's jurors. So it's low because this is September. Those mailings went out, like I said, in October. We mail out about 2,800 qualification questionnaires. And so it should level out because we need, I think we have probably close to 500 that we're going to have to resend because we have not heard back from the second requests for questionnaires.
So is 15,000 going to do it?
It should. Historically, we get close to that, so I think we should be okay.
I think if you see a number that the department heads have requested, you can be fairly certain that the department heads have put some thought into it and it'll be adequate. If you see where the county administrator cut something, well, then maybe you can question whether I left them enough money. But Christie requested 15, so I'm pretty confident 15 would be sufficient. All right. If there's no requested changes in tab 6, we'll move on to tab 7, which is our medical examiners. And unfortunately, Patty was not able to be here today. But if there are any questions on pages 63 or 64, I will try to answer them. Uh-oh.
Other professional services, could you enlighten us a little more on that?
Autopsies. That's the bulk of what's going in there. It's highly variable from year to year. Depends on how many people die and the circumstances upon their death. We decreased that a little bit, for one thing, because the trend history told me I could, and two, is we're expecting that the CT scanner will help further reduce the number of autopsies required. So I lowered it down to what we had spent last year, and then hopefully that number will continue to be able to decrease over the next few years.
Is the decrease that we see through September, that was before any of the CT went online, right?
Yep, the CT has not scanned any bodies as of yet. It's just now going online. Yep, like I said, it's cyclical. If you look at the history on it, man, it is just up and down. So it's a hard number to put a peg on. Yep, Supervisor Burning.
So looking at 2021, if you take the average of 20 and 21, that's 100,000. I mean, would we have an appetite for budgeting it at 100,000?
Yeah, I don't remember if it was 19 or if it was 18, but it was at like 140,000 just a few years ago. So I look out a little bit longer term on those averages.
Got it.
Just because of space on these pages, I can only fit so far.
But then, on the other hand, we do have that CT machine
Yep.
that's coming online. So that is supposed to, one, generate revenue with surrounding counties, and two, should help reduce this because we're not farming that out. So I would think, just based on the fact that we spent the amount of money that we did in cash, that we should be able to lower that for outsource. I mean, because this is outsourced autopsy, correct?
Yep.
And what's the percentage? And I know Patty's not here. Do we know what the percentage of the CT scanners we're supposed to keep in-house? I don't remember that.
Yeah, you know, it's
particular.
going to be based upon circumstances. So every case is evaluated independently about what is deemed a suspicious death, whether it can just be scanned, because there's some other circumstances that, you know, it probably is safe. So it's just a precaution that we're going to scan them then, rather than doing the autopsy. And those that are clearly, they're going to be autopsied anyways. So we're just going to send them off. So those are going to continue. I mean, there are deaths in the county that are going to be autopsied.
Yeah, that need the
forever.
more
Yep.
detailed autopsy. So, but what I'm thinking is, if we got this machine at the dollar amount that we did, our ROI, and we're not offsetting it with revenues.
We are. So if you look up on the screen,
I'm sorry.
46,195. I increased her revenues from 60,000 to 75,000. So I added 15,000 in revenue, and I deducted 15,000 on her expenses. So that was the adjustment that I made, not having any idea of what the future data is going to look like.
Well, I would be comfortable
Yep.
going down to 100,000, but maybe we could take a little poll.
I'd have to remind you, though, remember the numbers that she shows, the trend lines for the aging population, the number of suicides, the drug problems. Business is good over there. I wouldn't want to take her budget down. She knows what's going on over there. It is a very busy shop.
Right. So so you have a request to reduce the other professional services from 115,000 to 100,000. Are there any other changes on page 63 before we'll take them as a package deal, if not?
Yeah, I have a question. Miscellaneous repair and maintenance, is that on the CT machine?
Yeah, that's for the new CT scanner.
So there's $5,000 also, that's now been added on, so.
Correct. Yep. Cut 30, but added 5, yeah. All right. So I have just the one change then on page 63. So if you want to show your preference, reducing other professional services from 115,000 to 100,000. Right. That one fails. Right.
And maybe we're beating a dead horse with this, but if we're not going to go to 100, can we say 110? Try to save a little bit on it?
I guess I would turn to the chair on this, whether you want to entertain those types of motions or.
You know, I was just thinking long-term, I mean, it's 9:30 now. We're saving money, or we're addressing the issues. I think it's maybe best in our future discussions if we have give and take on this, so that the author of the amendment and anybody who has a question could raise their issues first. Maybe we could avoid double votes on it. Maybe for this item, I would just say I'd say if Supervisor Shirley would like a vote, let's do it, but let's try to keep our votes to one item per issue if we can for the future.
Okay, so the question before you then is other professional services, medical examiner, reducing it from 115,000 to 110,000. All right, so that was approved then, just barely. All right, so $5,000 reduction on page 63. All right, we'll move on to tab 8, which is Justice Support Services.
Could I ask the Administrator one quick question?
Yes.
As we go through the budget, and let's just say, give us an example. What happens if there's less money spent than we budgeted, and what if there's more money spent? What do you do?
Well, there's more money spent, no one's leaving the room.
I meant, let's say in case of the medical examiner, you know, they spend 120 instead of 110.
Yeah.
What do you do at that point?
So, so if somebody goes over budget, nothing, we just go over budget. So a budget is a guideline. So we're giving the department heads a guideline, and they're going to get a talking to if they go over. You can see they're all pretty afraid of me. But that's what happens. The department heads do an excellent job, though, of staying under budget, and they're not limited to a line item budget. So if they have $115,000 in autopsy expenses next year, but the CT scanner worked just fine and no repairs were needed, they're still on budget for the year. And that's what I look at, is whether the department stayed on budget or not on budget. So that's how we evaluate the departments. So you've reduced a part of their budget, you've reduced a line item, but they can shift within their department to offset some of that. At the end of the day, though, nothing happens to them. If they keep it up, though. Right. That's satisfactory. Tab 8 is Justice Support Services, so page 67. Now, Justice Support Services, this department, I'll just say, is completely in flux. The department's a year and a half old. We're really trying to get our feet underneath this department of where the expenses are going. So some of these are still wild guesses of how this department is settling out. I would expect by the end of '23, we're going to have a really good understanding of the pattern for this department. But I don't have that multi-year history on them because they're only a year and a half old department. So a little bit of grace on their budget would be requested.
The purchase services, is that a specific item that they're looking for in there to be almost a 45,000 increase?
Yeah, so the purchase service is the drug testing. And so the judges are asking for more and more drug testing, so we did beef that budget up by quite a bit.
And I know Supervisor Leaf can attest to this too. Like in the last couple of years, this program has been all over the place and not being able to deliver services also. So if you can't drug test, like there's no need to buy drug tests. So like that's why this is the way it is.
Supervisor Leaf, go ahead.
So I would agree, definitely. And I'm reluctant to cut anything from this budget just because we're really just getting started with the staff we have in place now that's solid and really working well. So I think we don't have the information available to really know yet. And I don't want to starve it, so.
All right, so we'll move on from this one, unless there's any other questions under tab 8. Yeah, all right. All right. So tab 9 is district attorney. I'm going to keep you guys moving because at noon there's another meeting in this room. So we could recess for lunch and come back this afternoon and spend all evening if you like, but I am going to try to kind of keep you guys moving, try to get our average up. All right.
And we can also plan on a very short break at 10 o'clock.
Fine. Page 71, under tab 9. Are there any questions on the district attorney's budgets? Page 71 and 72.
I just have one.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, thank you for the reminder. So this is going to change next year when the new offices are, or whenever the new offices are completed, because we are going to get him another legal assistant at some point in time. I would imagine that should be a priority of ours. I mean, it's just, they need it. They need it badly. And I know we've talked about
long-term plan for the county that addresses that. Yes, Supervisor Burning. I have everything planned out well into the future. Any other questions then on tab 9, district attorney? Otherwise, we'll move on. All right. Tab number 10, children's child support. This is page 74 and 75 in the budget book. Yeah,
the only thing I had was staff development again, but, I mean, Lisa, I had taken $500 off. Are you okay with that? Just so we could, it's the only pink mark in your area, Lisa, and I'm so sorry.
She actually has a lot of new staff members.
Yeah, okay.
So she may actually need some new training. She's got some that are really awesome, that are like the best child support people in the whole state, right?
Yeah, Chad just got an award for that, so yes. Anyway, staff development is, we have 2 new staff that have to go to training. We just spent $1,300 for the fall conference, so it's probably going to be more than that, but I try to get as many staff. In-person training is better than none, so I mean, you can. I mean, we could probably find it somewhere else in the budget,